So everybody online tells you the goal is to quit your job, okay, become your own boss, move abroad, and live life, right? I'm sure a lot of you guys are probably from like my generation where you're listening to people like Dame Dash or Robert Kiyosaki, talking about being your own boss and, really talking against having a job. And that means like just over broke. Well, let me tell you something. I did that, and I'm going to be real with you. Working a job, okay, overseas gives me way more freedom than trying to be self employed abroad. Okay. And if you think that sounds crazy, watch this video before you disagree. Okay. So I'm Expat D. Man, welcome to my channel. If you're into expat content, I'm definitely your guy, man. So, have you ever dreamed about moving abroad? Okay, I'm sure you hear like your favorite content creators talk about working remotely. They might even make it sound like it's so easy. Just get a remote job, man, and move to Thailand or move to Brazil or move to Vietnam or one of these cheap countries. You could just start over in another country. Well, this video is going to save you a lot of stress, disappointment, and save you thousands of dollars, right? It's all about the Benjamins, right? So let's talk about the first point. Okay, let's talk about stability. Okay, stability hits different overseas. Okay, listen, when you're abroad, stability is not boring. Okay, it's survival. Being self employed overseas means you got currency fluctuations that could wipe you out. You could have clients that can ghost you. Algorithm changes, it can kill your income. One slow month can take you from, beach life to panic mode. But, working a job overseas, it does provide you a steady income, predictable pay, local recognition, and better access to services. There's a lot of things that people just don't tell you. Like I'll give you an example from a mind frame. Okay, one thing that I don't like is when people talk about like, oh, I moved out of America, I'm never going back, right? And uh, I've been out for this many years or this many months, you know, this amount of time, and it's a better mind frame to know that you're in a stable position to go back when you want to and you could return abroad. You don't feel trapped. The worst feeling is to be abroad and you feel like you're trapped overseas and you can't go back. Okay, that's not really a healthy way. Okay. Another thing that you want to look at is when you study the market and you find a decent job, there's a lot of, overseas, there's a lot of good situations. So you can have a better housing situation, not one where you're in struggle mode and you hear about like these $200, $300, condos that you can get in these different countries, and it kind of limits you. And you could be in a much better situation. You don't have to um, be in struggle mode that much like you may have to do when you're your own boss. Okay. Um, and let me tell you, before you say, but I don't want a boss, ask yourself, do you want peace or chaos? Okay. Let's look at my second point. There's just better housing and visa options. So here's something nobody says in the Just Move Abroad videos. Okay. When you're employed, let's say, like if it's a school or a company or an organization, well, you get legit residency. Okay. A lot of people that are doing this, remote work stuff, they're not in the country legally. They're on tourist visas and they do border runs and all that stuff. And depending on the country that you're in, let's say you're basically there illegally. So if you have a situation where you need to go to the hospital or you have some type of emergency, you're there illegally. So you may not have the same rights as someone that has a legit um, visa. Okay. Another thing, you can easily open a bank account. If you're there and you're just like on a tourist visa doing some remote work, you can't really open a bank account legally in a lot of these countries. You have to do like different loopholes and things like that. Of course, you got the visa panic, like I spoke about before. Every 30 or to 90 days, you got a border hop and the anxiety. So, like, what happens if you cross the border and you got all your stuff in the country that you're residing in, and they tell you you can't get back in? What happens? That's terrible. I personally have a situation where I was, this is for a different reason, but I was denied entry back into a country I was working in, and all my stuff I had to forfeit, all of it. And I had to start all the way over. Literally, I started all the way with one suitcase because all my stuff was in a foreign country. And I had to start all the way over. Yep. So all my pictures and things that, like stuff that I thought was very important, never got access to it again. hmm Here's another thing. Some landlords, they could refuse renting to you because you're temporary. Okay. S- Um, even some even include, housing and good housing. Yep. So being your own boss gives you freedom, sure, but being employed gives you belonging. Okay, let's look at my next point. Um, you get a lifestyle upgrade, not a downgrade. A lot of times when you're an entrepreneur abroad, it sounds cool until you're stressing over invoices in a country where nobody uses email. Okay, when your income is stable, everything else improves. You could be in a better neighborhood, safer transportation. You actually enjoy the culture instead of surviving it. Like in the particular country that I'm in, I've got a car, a decent car, right? My car is only a couple years old. I have a driver's license. That's something that I could not have if I was not here legally. Okay. And then I know you've heard countless stories just about different expats that start scamming and doing a bunch of shady stuff because they're running out of money and their whole personality changes. Well, if you're in a situation where you're there in a more stable situation, you don't have to resort to any of that stuff. And this is the real truth. Okay. Because, let's be honest, what's the point of moving abroad if you're still stressed like you're in the US? Okay. The goal is to create a situation where you're living better, you're living less stressful. Okay. Here's another point that people don't really talk about. It's a built-in community. One thing that a lot of there's a video that I remember watching from a content creator in Thailand. Forget his name, but he had mentioned that he did not speak to someone for a week, and I'm like, dang, right? He was not getting any social interaction. And at least, when one thing I did like about working a job is that you have a built-in community and you have a built-in community of people that you can trust. This is not like, someone that you're just meeting off the street that could be trying to scam you or have, like ill intention. These are people that they're kind of on your same level because you're working a similar job, you're in a similar income bracket, so they're not like just trying to get over on you necessarily, right? So that's one thing abroad does give you. It gives you coworkers and local friends that you can kind of trace, like them, right? You're going to see them at work. You're kind of tied to them in a certain way. Um, you can see other expats that are in the same journey. So you have kind of like-minded situations. So it's a lot easier to build a community this way, and then you can also find people that will teach you the culture, people that you can trust around you, right? Self-employment overseas, it can seem like kind of a free-for-all. You could feel isolated. It can be hard to make real friendships, hard to integrate culturally. It's just you and your laptop and your Wi-Fi, right? So, you can't build a new life if you only talk to your laptop. Right? What fun is that? There is some cons that I know people are selling you the dream online, but that's the part that people are not really talking about. Okay? And here's my next point. You could build a better travel balance. So, just like I was saying before, some people move abroad and they never leave their city. Okay, not because they don't want to, but because they can't afford to do it. Right? They're just struggling, just trying to build themselves up. Right? When you're employed, you have paid leave and structured breaks, and there's budget certainty, and travel feels like a reward, not a risk. So being your own boss gives you time, but that doesn't guarantee money. Having a job gives you both, right? And then here's my last point. There's some hidden savings that nobody talks about. So this one right here is where most people get humbled. Working abroad often includes perks like free or discounted schooling, and that's huge because typically, if you have a family and you're moving your family abroad, they don't really have I mean, they have public schooling, but it is that is not most of these public schools. They will not give your child. They won't put them on track to go to a college because the whole like curriculum and system is not aligned to U.S. standards, and that's important. Like one thing that I can say is, love or hate America. They like the college system is really recognized around the world, and that's one thing that I wouldn't give up. Okay, and I'll tell you, these international schools, man, they cost money, money, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 a year. And, as much as think you're going to do well in your business, that's a lot of money. And that's something and that this fee I'm talking about is per child. So these are costs that you got to think about. You got to think about this stuff, right? Another thing is healthcare. Healthcare can get very expensive, and a lot of these overseas jobs, they pay for your healthcare. Okay. And then there's a lot that will give you flight reimbursement or they'll fly you back. So that's a nice balance. You don't, when you have that, you don't feel like you're escaping. You don't feel like you're escaping, right? And then, there's travel allowances. There's a lot of perks depending on the job that you get. So I'll tell you, when you're self-employed overseas, you pay for everything yourself, and every country charges foreigners double. Okay. So, you're not saving money. The country is saving money from you. Yeah. So anyway, so no, being overseas, being employed overseas doesn't make you less free. Sometimes it makes you more free because you're not fighting for survival. You're building a life. If you have a job, nice stable foundation. There's other ways to do it, and I know so many people talk about building online income and remote work. And don't get me wrong, these are good options too. I'm not saying not to do that, but just because you hear it and you hear the hype, that doesn't mean that you may like that option. Everyone's not going to like that option. You may do it. Some people try it. They love it. They love it, love it, love it. But it's not for everybody. And I mean, I still, I do my entrepreneurial things on the side and stuff like that. But I like building it from this type of foundation. And that's kind of word to the wise. I know a lot of people online getting you hyped up saying, oh man, just save $1,000 and, step out on a limb and move to this country. It's so cheap and all that stuff. But there's another side to the story that nobody's really talking about that much. Okay. So if you want a part two, of how to actually find a job abroad, comment, drop the jobs, and I'll make it. I'll let you know. Okay, I got a lot of hot content ideas coming up. I've been over 35 different countries. I've been traveling abroad since it's been since 2002, in and out of the U.S. Right, so I'm very experienced, and I got some real hot videos coming up because my travel season is coming up, And I got some collaborations coming, some really hot stuff. So, man, stick with me on this channel, man. It's about to get real interesting. Yep. So make sure like, share, subscribe, man. Let's get this channel to grow. I'm Expat D. We're going to end it here. Peace, and I am out.